All right. Welcome back to the Canyon Heights Ward podcast. Today, we are lucky enough to meet with Brother Gurule, Mark Gurule. How are you?
I'm doing really well. How are you, Gregory?
I'm okay.
Good.
Um, so, as I usually say, the beginning is a good place to start. What do you remember about your childhood?
Well, actually, I have a lot of very early memories of my childhood.
What's
Um,
one of your earliest?
I would say I was between 2 and 3 years old, and my mom was a stay-at-home mom at the time, and my dad was in the Air Force, Kirtland Air Force Base, as a mechanic. And I remember how she used to sit at the sewing machine and she would sew clothes so that I would always have something new to wear. And she would love to make fried eggs and she made homemade tortillas. So for lunchtime, she would take a piece of the tortilla and dip it into the egg yolk and feed me. And I would always get this big smile on my face. It was a really fun childhood, but have always been a daydreamer. Um, Maybe you could call it in my later life a nonconformist. But basically, I used to sit at the window and just stare outside and look at the birds, and there was nothing else that was more beautiful than looking at nature. And at some point, my mom, she recognized that maybe I needed a brother. So when I was 3 years old, she was getting ready to be uh, giving birth to my brother. And it was at Presbyterian Hospital here in Albuquerque. I was born and raised in Albuquerque. And
At Caseman, then?
this was the one that the main hospital that was near downtown.
Okay.
Yeah, and so I remember she was going to be going into labor in a couple of days, and my dad took me down there. And children weren't allowed in the wards, of course, especially somebody that was 3 years old. And he parked outside, and I remember looking up to one of the really high floors, and she was standing there wearing a pink bathrobe, waving high back to me. And I didn't know what was going on. I just knew that she wasn't at home and she was in this strange building that was really tall and I couldn't get to it.
Yeah.
And my brother came home and immediately I got jealous because all of a sudden there was a new center of attention. And I remember telling mom that, Mama, I don't like him. Send him back.
Yeah.
But we got along great. I used to try to steal his baby food from the little table. I especially liked the banana pudding that she would feed him. I didn't care for any of the other stuff, just the good stuff.
All right. So did, did you just have the one brother in the end, or did more
Yes,
come along
just
later?
one brother.
One.
So I had one sibling.
Okay.
And we were typical brother where we were competitive with each other. We would pull pranks on each other, pretend to beat each other up, but in the long run, we were great friends.
Pretend to beat each other up?
Pretend, not actually drawing blood or anything, just
Oh,
being mischievous.
but there were fists involved.
There were.
Okay. Um, cool. I had a question and it left me. So tell
Well,
me,
let me tell you a little bit about what was going on in the world when I was born.
okay?
This was in the very early 60s, and it was a very politically charged world that the United States was in. We were in the middle of the Vietnam War. The women's rights movement was in full force. Um, we were trying to abolish busing, where children of different colors were required to go to different schools. And it
Sec-
was also the beginning of the hippie movement, where it was all about free love, and a lot of people use psychedelic drugs. So that was the environment that I was born into and have my earliest memories about.
Okay. So let's go forward in time. Tell me about when you started school.
Okay. Um, I was born and raised Catholic, and in the time period between 1962 and 1965, the Catholic Church convened for what they called the Second Vatican Council. And the Pope became aware that the Catholic Church was in trouble. It was outdated. It needed to be modernized. And it was a very, very long process. I attended St. Mary's School, which is downtown Albuquerque, where we lived in the North Valley. And the school was run by the Sisters of Charity. So at that time, the nuns wore their full habits. They had their head covering gear, the long gowns, and it was a very, very strict, disciplined type of environment. And as I said, I was the nonconformist. So I always had questions. Why do we have to go to church every Friday? Why do we have to wear uniforms? Why do we have girls go to recess at this park and boys go to recess at that park? So they called me a troublemaker.
Ah, okay. So how did the Pope end up dealing with that situation, with modernizing?
There was a series of councils, and so the convention itself had the cardinals and the deacons that represented the Catholic Church in Rome. And they were called to provide answers or suggestions on how things could appeal to the current world. And they would take votes, and eventually something would become canon law, which would have to be distributed down through the church organization in order to be implemented. And it was a long process.
What, in the end, what changes were implemented?
The first thing I remember was when Sister Mary Dorothy came to our classroom. And what we were supposed to do when a teacher came in is everybody had to stand at attention and greet that person. And this time she was not wearing her habit. She didn't have her head covering, and she wasn't wearing the gown, and everybody was in shock. It was like she wasn't wearing any clothes. We closed our eyes, we looked down, and we didn't know what to do. So it was a moment to me in history where I saw that some of the very strict rules were now starting to be relaxed. And that opened up the door for people that were not nuns to actually become teachers. So men were allowed to be teachers, women who were not nuns were allowed to be teachers, and now it was an environment of a perfect blend of the sacred and the secular.
Okay. Um, Tell me about high school. Was it
Well,
still a Catholic school that you were in?
yes, I attended St. Pius X High School.
Okay.
Somehow, even though I had a C to D average in elementary school, I was able to pass the test based on science and mathematics. Those were my skills as well as art. And at that period in time, St. Pius was very progressive.
What kind of art? Is it painting or sculpture or just drawings? What kind of art?
Music.
Music.
Uh, yes, music as a fine art was a big thing in my life. We always
Or instrument?
instrument at that time was a piano because Santa Claus brought me a piano one year, and it
Nice.
was a little toy. And I was like the little chicken that was poking on the keys, but I just loved the way that it sounded. And there was always music everywhere at home, all the time. We had one of those old fashioned record players, and it sort of looked like a suitcase. And you would open up the top cover, and there would be the turntable.
Yeah.
And my mom used to always collect the 45s, the single hits that had the B side on the other side that no one ever heard. And so the art, basically the music, the science, and the math got me into St. Pius.
Very nice. Um, what about so did you have girlfriends in high school? Were you a girl chaser? 'Cause I was. uh,
Well, I was very conservative, but I met a girl named Martha, and she was an actress. So she was also into the fine arts. And we became very good friends. And I joined the drama club. I played goofy characters, and it was really fun the way that she and I were able to interact with each other on stage. And we were
you
in
Romeo and you were, I mean, was she and you were Romeo?
sort of. I played the grumpy old man, and she was the grumpy old man's wife.
Okay.
And it was it was a comedy. So I was very young, and remember having to put the makeup on my hair to make it look gray, so it was convincing. And
Yeah.
then, since we didn't drive, we were too young to drive. Our parents used to alternate taking us home from school, and that's when the first kiss
Ooh.
happened.
In the back of your parents' car.
In the back of my parents' car, yes, exactly. And I just remember the whole day I was disoriented. I didn't know who was who. I didn't care about the world and all of that. And
Yeah.
yeah,
The first time a girl kissed me, I just about went comatose.
I understand.
I didn't see that one coming. Uh, so, and this was at a church activity. It was at the big Christmas party, and so everyone was there to see it, which made
No.
all the more awkward for me. Just really, just comatose almost. She had to kind of take me back into the hall and revive me. Just talking with me.
Of
You know,
course.
but man, there wasn't a more sheepish person in the world when I went back into the so yeah, that was mine. So and so what happened from there?
Well, things started getting a little bit too serious. And I think part of it was because I started kindergarten when I was either 5 or 6 years old. I graduated from high school when I was 16, and everybody was 1 or 2 years ahead of me emotionally. So she wanted to get married right after high school. She wanted to have a family. But at 16 years old, I could not understand those concepts.
Mhm.
It just was not going to work for me. So we eventually graduated and went our separate ways.
So you started school early?
Very early, yes. I was born in December. So if I would have waited one more month, I would have been into the same age group as my peers. But I ended up in December or November, so I started school very early and finished up early too.
I was a year older than everyone else. I got held back in kindergarten. Uh, Talking about emotional. That I cried a lot. It was the earliest manifestations of the OCD. If I cut like a millimeter too deep, I just that was the end of the world. So
Mhm.
um so you were younger, I was older. Um
Well, I really enjoyed high school though. It was a liberating experience for me.
yeah,
Um, it was a time of more independence where I was forced to start making decisions. Before that, my parents decided everything for me, and now I have opinions. And it was, I think, a catalyst for what turned into my adult years, allowing me to be okay with not going with the flow if I felt that it wasn't right for me. I needed to satisfy my needs instead of being a slave to somebody's expectations.
okay. Um so you graduate and tell me about what life looks like then. Do you go to college? Do you get a job? Or have you had a job during high school? When did you start working?
Well, I got a scholarship to Adams State College, which is in Alamosa, Colorado. It was an out of state school, and at that point in my life, I needed more independence from my parents. And it was a very, very good school. It was a very small college. There were no movie theaters, nobody had a car. one grocery store. Everybody lived in the dormitories, and it was all about school. And I started out as a pre-med major. So my aspiration is that I was going to become a medical doctor or do something in the medical field. And I did that for the first year, my freshman year. Then I discovered the choir, and that changed everything because my love for music overpowered my love for scientific reason. And I changed my major. I went from pre-med to music.
Ah, um, I was in choir in high school, and I just loved it. To me, it was so much better than band. I was in band in middle school. I played the clarinet, and that just didn't really wasn't that fun for me. But then, but choir, I loved singing, and I was animated, and so yeah, I
Sure. Well, this choir was very intense, and it was a very close-knit group. We had practice 2 hours a day, Monday through Friday. It was a 1 credit hour course, and we had performances. So I literally became a family with these people to the point where I could share things with them on a personal basis and yet still have that professional relationship.
cool. So what about work?
Work is very interesting. I ended up falling in my grades in college and lost my scholarship. So I moved back to Albuquerque and lived with my mom. And she says, "You're either going to go to school or you're going to work." And I didn't want to, I really didn't know what I wanted to do in my life professionally. So I took a job at Burger King, of all places, and started out cleaning bathrooms, mopping floors, doing all kinds of maintenance. But there was just something about this customer service concept that really intrigued me that I loved. I used to like to see the people that were coming in hungry and try to make their day. And I did that for about 4 years. I eventually got promoted to a shift manager and was working independently with a crew of about 5 to 10 people. At some point, I think there was a heavenly intervention that happened, and
So
we had these regulations that if you have pre-cooked food, it could only stay in a warmer for so many minutes. And I had a surprise visit from a manager of another store, and there was a food item that exceeded the requirements, and I was fired on the spot. So suddenly I was unemployed, and I was not a student. So I had to really do some soul searching to decide what am I going to do next.
okay, and what did you find out?
Well, I love biology. I love agriculture. And I've always been drawn to those types of sciences. And I thought, well, this is something that I'm good at. I think I'm going to go back to college.
From school?
Yes, it turned out that I went to the College of St. Joseph, which was on the Rio Grande River. It doesn't exist anymore. It's now the current St. Pius X High School campus, which was kind of ironic that I went to St. Pius High School and now I'm at their new campus, but it was actually called by a different name. I finished my degree in biology, and I got my first laboratory job a few years after that.
And what was that? What were you doing in the lab?
I was working for St. Joseph's Hospital, which is on Lomas near University. It's now called Loveless Healthcare Systems. And I was a courier. I would drive the company vehicle around to doctors' clinics, and I would pick up specimens and I would bring them back to the lab for people to test. There was a supervisor in the chemistry department who saw my enthusiasm because I was always willing to go above and beyond what my job responsibilities were. And one day he pulled me aside and he said, "Have you ever thought about actually working in the laboratory doing testing?" And of course, I was elated and I jumped at that opportunity. So there was this one little chemistry analyzer machine that they were using to do drug testing, urine drug testing. And he said he needed a person that could come in on Saturdays and run the machine. If I was interested, I would have the job. And I did. I ended up working there for 5 years and went from being a courier to a laboratory technician to a laboratory technologist, and eventually left the job as a certifying scientist in toxicology.
Okay. When did you discover the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints?
Well, this takes us further in the future. I have been identifying with the church for 3 years now. And I discovered the church really by accident. I think the church found me. And this is when I was living in Houston. And I was working for the federal government there as a scientist. And I always loved the piano, thank you, Santa Claus, and bought an instrument for my house. And I needed piano lessons. So we had this neighborhood website where people could post like they're selling something or they have services or community announcements. And a young woman named Bonnie posted that she was a piano teacher and she was looking for new students. And she only lived about 2 blocks from where I lived. And I thought, well, this is great. This is perfect. She introduced me to classical music, technique, expression, and I really loved what I was experiencing. And I remember one day after my lesson, I was going to the car and she darted out after me and said, "Are you looking for a church?" And I was kind of stunned. I really didn't know where that came from. And I said, "Well, actually, yes, because I have been exploring different faiths during my 15 years in Houston because I knew that there was something missing. I knew that there was a lot about Catholicism that I wasn't comfortable with. And I knew that there was a spiritual aspect to life, but I didn't know how to reach it. So she said, we're having something that's called stake conference. Would you like to go with my husband and my kids? And I said, yeah, sure, why not? I'll go ahead and do this. So they picked me up from my house. We went to the stake center, and I really didn't have the greatest experience because I didn't know that there was so much business involved. Sustaining people and all the new direction that is coming from the state presidency, and I didn't know any of these people, and I said, well, this is not really what I thought it was going to be. And she says, well, this is not the way it is all the time. How about if you come and attend one of our sacrament meetings, because you'll get a better idea of what the church is all about. You'll get to meet people and you'll get to participate. And that's exactly what happened. I remember walking in. I wasn't wearing a suit or tie. I was wearing jeans and a t-shirt at that time. I knew nothing about the church. And immediately people greeted me at the door. They said hi to me. They wanted to know what my name was. They wanted to know how long I had been searching for a church. And there was this overwhelming sense of community, which is something that I had never experienced before.
Yeah, that's one of the great blessings of the church, Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. You're never alone. So yeah, that's
absolutely right. And so then missionary lessons started at that point. I had found something that met my needs. I had already grown up Catholic, so everything with catechism and the scriptures and all of that was already in place. It's just that I didn't have an environment to grow. And when I started taking lessons with the missionaries, they were kind, they were patient, they could judge what my needs were, where I needed to grow, what my strengths were, and what I could potentially accomplish. So I went for it. I said, yes, this is the church that's right for me. There's something right about this. I can't put it into words, but I can feel it in my soul.
So since then, what have you found nurtures your testimony the most?
The thing that has always been the most important to me is family. I am an only child right now. My brother passed away. My father passed away. And 2 months ago, my mother passed away.
I'm sorry.
And, oh, that's okay. That's okay. She's in a good place.
Yeah.
And I still remember when she passed that night. She was a victim of COVID. And she was hospitalized for 4 weeks in intensive care. After that, she was in an institution for 4 more weeks for rehabilitation, but she was never the same after that. She was never able to drive. She couldn't take care of herself. And at this point, I was living in Albuquerque, and I had a full-time job. And I made the decision to resign from my job to be a full-time caregiver for her. And it was a tough job for the last 2 months of her life because it was 24-hour care. She needed medication every 2 hours. I had a clock set. I rarely slept. I had to cook soft meals for her and regular meals for myself, take care of the pets, do the shopping, pay bills, the whole works. it would never have worked if I was employed at that time. But what I remember, and this is, I think, the most fascinating thing that has ever happened to me, was the night that she passed. And I was playing the piano at that night for her because it would soothe her. And I was playing a Mozart sonata. And at this point, she was in and out of consciousness. Most of the time, she was out of it. And I remember after I finished practicing, I went to go check on her and give her medication. And she was flat on her back, but her arms were sticking straight up to the ceiling. And she had this big smile on her face. And I was shocked. I didn't know what was going on. She's normally sleeping. And I said, Mom, what's going on? And she smiled and she says, I see a baby boy. And I paused to think about, what is she actually experiencing right now? And I said, Mom, that's the baby Jesus. He's here to take you home. And she passed in his loving arms. What a blessing that was.
Yes. Yes.
I actually witnessed Jesus Christ. And that solidifies my testimony because I know he's real.
Thank you for sharing that. So I guess we skipped a large portion of time. Is there anything that happened during that time that you think would be noteworthy?
I think so. I think we're born with a consciousness. We're born with a mind. We're all very different people. It doesn't matter what our abilities, our skill levels are. When it all boils down to it, we're people, we're human, we're all children of God. And we have to embrace that as a society. I think that that's something that the world struggles with constantly. We see disagreements and wars and crime, but there's also a good side to life too. And I think it's our responsibility to cultivate that in our lives and also pass that on to our children.
Did you ever have a family of your own?
No, I didn't. I didn't. For some reason, I guess my destiny is to remain single. I've done the dating scene, but never got married or had children.
Yeah. Well, I'm with you, brother. I turn 40 next year, and yeah, I don't know if it'll ever happen. It took like 35 years before I had a girlfriend, and it didn't last very long, and it ended pretty badly.
Oh no.
I'm out of the mid singles and in this ward for the time being. But which reminds me, so when you were baptized, was that into the Canyon Heights ward, or where?
No, this is when I was living in Houston. It was called the Oakhurst Ward. And I had a very good companion. who baptized me. It took me a while to feel that I was worthy of baptism. It's nothing that you say, oh yeah, I'm going to go do this on Saturday. It's not like that at all. There's a lot of cleansing that you have to do with yourself,
Yeah.
you know, and it was the missionaries that were very instrumental in guiding me through that process. And in fact, I was baptized on my birthday.
Happy birthday.
I'll never forget it.
Great birthday present.
Absolutely.
When did you move back to Albuquerque?
I moved back in August of last year, so it's almost been 1 year.
Okay. Um, what, sorry, if you could send one message 100 years into the future for your posterity, well, for others to hear, what would it be?
Well, to tell you the truth, when I look at life, I've gone through a lot. People, we all have issues. There are things that we can't control, but we need to always stay focused on the fact that our Heavenly Father will always be there for us. And it reminds me of a song, lyrics to a Christian music that I think is really appropriate for that. It says, in the eye of the storm, you remain in control. In the middle of the war, you guard my soul. You alone are the anchor when my sails are torn. Your love surrounds me in the eye of the storm.
Beautiful. All right. Well, I think that's all I have for today.
Okay, this is great, Gregory.
Yeah, it's been great getting to know you more. And I just have to say, I love talking with you. Your voice has this cadence and tenor to it that reminds me of my great uncle. And he passed about 10 years ago, and it's really neat to hear that voice again, sort of.
That's great to hear.
And my mom and dad share that sentiment. After talking with you that one day at Break the Fast, I got home and I'm like, did you notice? Yeah, we noticed. Oh,
Oh boy.
he was a great man. He great man. So
Well, thank you.
um uh that's it for this episode of the Canyon Heights Ward podcast. And we'll be back with another in the next couple weeks. So hopefully sooner. Thanks for tuning in. And again, Mark, thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
So,
It's been all mine.
all
Take
right. Bye.
Bye.